Right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the February APAC community call. Today we have a sort of packed agenda. First, I'll go through some Odyssey news. It's the beginning of the year, and there's always some news going on at Odyssey. So I'll be sharing these with you guys first, and then I'll be handing it over to Mui so that she can give a short introduction on the new industry working group and its goals for 2024, followed by Nicole, who'll be giving us a introduction on the evidence translation work group, which sort of spun out from the 2003 APAC symposium. So I'm sure Nicole will provide an excellent background on that as well. So here we go. So on the Odyssey news, guys, some important dates for you guys to save on your calendars. So the symposiums for 2024 have been fixed. The dates have been fixed. So the European symposium will take place between June 1st and the 3rd. As always, it will also take place in Rotterdam this year as well at the steamship Rotterdam. So if you guys haven't been there, maybe it's a good opportunity for you guys to enjoy the ride at the sea. For the Global Symposium, it's been fixed for October 22nd to 24th. The last year's Global Symposium was at Hilton at East Brunswick, but this time it's at the Hyatt Regency at New Brunswick at the United States in New Jersey. So apparently the new venue is more closer to the city than the previous venue in 2023. So if you didn't have the honor to be there last year, maybe this year will be another opportunity for you to be at the United States and meet a lot of people that new faces and old faces, right? So that's the fixed date for the Global Symposium, and the last date is the APAC Symposium, right? So we've announced this last year as well as several times. I think this year as well. The dates are December 5th to 8th. It will be in Singapore. The venue is we'll share as soon as it's being fixed, but yeah, it'll be in Singapore, somewhere in Singapore. It's not a big city, but yeah, it'll be somewhere along in the city, right? So yeah, save the dates, guys. Make sure they don't overlap with any schedules that you have. I'm pretty sure it's a long, it's far out. So save the dates. And moving on to the next item. As always, beginning of the year, Odyssey has a tradition of each work group leads presenting on their objectives and key results for each year. So the OKRs for 2024, they're currently ongoing on the month of February at the global community calls. So if you haven't had the pleasure of being joining these calls live, all recordings and slides are posted on odyssey.org. They will also be posted at the Odyssey Workgroup website you see here at this URL. So I think Mui has already done hers on behalf of the Odyssey APAC. There are several others ongoing right now until the end of the month. So please, if you are part of a work group and you want to know what your work group's goals are for 2024 and what their achievements were for 2023, check it out. If you're interested in joining a work group, now would also be a great opportunity for you to watch the recordings and see what each work group's goals and objectives are. All right, next item, right? So since we were talking about the Global Symposium, the Scientific Review Committee for the Global Symposium the sign-up form is currently open, right? So if you click on this URL, you'll be asked to submit a form, and basically what your role entails if you are part of the review committee is to attend 3 planning calls in March. The timings are all US friendly. They're not always APAC friendly, but recordings will be posted in case you're not able to attend the calls live. And I'm pretty sure there's already a lot of folks who have done this in the past. So you're not always required to attend these calls live. So please don't let the meetings be a hurdle to sign up to this. You will also be asked to review, on average, 11 to 15 abstracts between the time of June 27th up until August 9th. I'm pretty sure this is plenty of time for you guys to review and submit your opinions on the abstracts that you were assigned to. And then the last role here will be for you guys to attend the final acceptance discussion, which will take place on August 15th. So if you guys have an area of expertise that you would like to contribute to this great open community, now will be a great opportunity for you guys to sign up and contribute to the 2024 Global Symposium. Even if you were part of the scientific review committee in the past, you need to sign up again for this year's scientific review committee. So please, if you are interested in continuing to take part, please do sign up again, although it might be a little tedious. But again, we don't want to trouble people who are not available every single year, right? And important date here, the deadline is February 16th, which is the US time, February 15th. So we have one more day for the APAC people. We also have 2 more days, right? We have 2 more days for the APAC people, and we do also have consent from the from Elise, who's coordinating this, that she's also willing to keep the sign up form open for a few more days in case there are more people, in case late signups come in through. So please don't let the deadline be a hurdle again. Please don't let the meetings be a hurdle. If you or have something that you would like to contribute, an area of expertise that you can contribute to, please do sign up, because we do want to see more APAC people being part of this scientific review committee.
So to provide a bit more update or info about, the scientific review committee, there are the 3 meetings and there is the 2-hour session, right? Because they are bigger time zone differences, you actually don't have to be at either of them. What you can do is provide all of your, like for the 2-hour meetings, as long as you provide all of your feedback in advance, right? And if there's a debate between the abstracts that you read, you'll get an email from Patrick and Elise about it to get some more clarification from you if needed, right? And the first 3 meetings are recorded, and the 3 meetings that are on the 7th, 14th, and the 21st is really logistics, like logistics around whether or not the format last year worked, whether or not we want to continue, how many posters we want to accept compared to how many software demos we want to accept. So it's those type of logistics. It's not, you're not missing out on the actual, review itself. And the review is actually quite simple. It is 11 to 15 abstracts you do have to read. And then there's a form that you fill out with the comments. You fill out not only a scoring, but also you can leave comments for both the steering committee or the author themselves. And this stuff is really great when it comes to contribution, because as these posters are submitted, there are always going to be new people or people that have been around. It's good to have the folks, different perspectives to provide their feedback on how well or how things should be improved upon the posters. I know on this side, we've had a lot in the past, we've had some where the posters weren't exactly aligned to OHDSI, so the reviewers took the time to review it and provided feedback so that then the posters can be redone, right, and then resubmitted. So those are the type of work that we're looking for, and it's a good opportunity for the APAC side to start getting involved in the global side, above and beyond just the OHDSI APAC stuff that we do, right? So I put it out there. It can be anybody. Okay, it does not have to be a professor. Okay? It could be anybody on this call, anybody in APAC can participate. And like me, I am very I'm not scientific at all. So all mine are okay. This was written really well. I like to know more information about X, Y, and Z. Right. So you don't have to be scientific either. Of course, I picked the data standard one, but still, I don't always have the area of knowledge. I shouldn't say expertise, but the knowledge of that project. But I still review it and provide feedback from someone who is naive to that area, which sometimes is a different perspective as well. So just want to put it out there.
Thanks for that context, Mui. Right. So I guess the takeaway here is, since we're all Asian, right? Most of us are Asian. Don't let your title stop you from signing up, because that's not what we're looking for at this moment. So, Jason, you have your hand up?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. May I know the deadline for the abstract submission for global symposium?
It's not been announced yet, but there are discussions of the deadline being sometime in June.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
the review
this
are
one
starting
said-
in June 27th,
Yep.
right?
If
Yeah.
the review starts in June 27th, typically it's like around 2 weeks before that, because it gives them some time to collate. So like Song said, unofficially probably before May is over.
So Jason, I'm pretty sure that's also going to be discussed during the logistic calls that happening in March, right?
Yeah.
So if the collaborator showcase timelines are released, I will definitely share back to the community at one of our community calls. So yeah, I'll get back to you on that, Jason. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Right. That's on the scientific review committee sign up. And last for me is the phenotype February, right? So for those who've not been in OHDSI for several years, it's sort of OHDSI tradition to define phenotypes in the month of February, right? It sort of rhymes, phenotype and February. And every year we choose certain conditions, specific conditions, where we review a bunch of scientific journals, scientific papers around that specific condition or disease area, and we come to a consensus on how we're going to define these group of patients with using the OMOP data model and Atlas and all the lovely OHDSI ecosystem tools. So in the year of 2024, we've chosen 4 conditions as you see here: Alzheimer's disease, lung cancer, both non-small cell and small cell, major depressive disorder, as well as pulmonary arterial hypertension. So there is a forum post that's going on where Gautam and Azza are providing regular updates on the proceedings so far. We're halfway in February. I think significant progress has been made around Alzheimer's disease. There's some literature review going on for the rest of the 3 other conditions. So if you guys are interested in checking out how this is progressing and how this is typically carried out, the website you see here on OHDSI.org is a good place to start. It also has links to the forum post as well as the past phenotype February definitions there. There's recordings as well posted for the meetings that have taken place in the past. So if you're more of the scientific person and interested in these disease areas, I think it's a good place for you to check it out, and also maybe take part in the meetings that take place between the phenotyping work group. So that's all I have prepared for today. Is there any questions before I hand over to Mui?
There's one more activity that it's not on here, but I want to make sure the community is aware of it as it's being in the plannings. So there is a plan to do a Themis hackathon. It's going to be a month hackathon, a month-long hackathon. What its objective is to ensure or update much of the OMOP CDM as well as the Themis documentation that currently exists. Because the Themis working group has restarted about 2 years ago, there's been new rules around standard CDM standards, right, for the CDM. So the team wants to figure out how to basically re-express some of that information in the documentation, in the GitHub repositories, in the coding that already exists. So we're now working on figuring out how to make that into a community effort. And we would love to involve the OHDSI APAC organization in this. And I think it'll be a great opportunity for those that are interested in the CDM and trying to learn more about how, the oncology extension works, how all these EPIC EMRs, EPIC conversions work, and what are some of the standard conventions that you'll run into, right? That would be a good way to learn more about all the rules and all the lessons that the community has already learned and wants to document. So be on the lookout for that. Once it becomes ready, we will provide more information about that. But I wanted to give folks a heads up about that.
Thanks for the heads up, Mui. Once that's finalized, I'll definitely have it as one of the OHDSI news in our community calls. All right, that's all on the OHDSI news. If there's no further comments or questions from the community, I'll go to our next agenda where we'll talk about the industry work group.
Well, so the industry working group is something that's new. We kicked this off. Actually, it's been in discussions for 1.5 years, but we finally decided to kick it off last symposium. So we had our first meeting at the OHDSI Symposium to formalize the industry working group. So what is the industry working group? If you can go to the next page. The industry working group is an open group, really where the members are focused on people who are tied to quote unquote industry, pharma, biotech, payer provider, those type of people and consultants like us, right? To work together to better represent what our interest is in the community and how can our interests be a bit more embedded in the community as well, right? So trying to foster, a stronger collaboration between the industry and the academics, the government, and the OHDSI community, trying to identify different, strategies to encourage participants in these different areas. We're not, one of the things that when we say that, some people do feel concerned that industry is here. I want folks to understand industry has been there since the beginning. Industry actually was there since the beginning of the OMOP Foundation. Right. It's just most of the time industry has always been in the back, and industry will still continue to stay in the back. We just want to make the industry's needs a bit more transparent so that those that are interested can help us with that. We're not saying that anybody has to be, just because there's an industry working group, that everybody has to work with the industry. Okay. So I want to make that very clear. Right. We're just talking about trying to identify what our needs are. And then for those who are interested, how can we work together to form a much more collaborative environment? Right. So that's really what the industry group is, work group is all about. If you can go to the next page. There are a lot of different goals that we want to capture. Now, the second one is to industry-based, or that term is to industry-based. Number one is we want, just like the community, we like to understand what data sources are available that can be used to work with the industry, right? So creating the industry term, a data marketplace, the OHDSI term, a data catalog, right? So, and figuring out how to support that so that there can be a collaboration between those that are interested in working with the industry and through their projects, right? The second one, again, is to industry term. I gotta ask them the changes. It's more about awareness. So instead of go to market, it's awareness. It's an OHDSI advocacy group. And the OHDSI, when I say OHDSI advocacy group, it's actually not advocacy in the OHDSI community. You'd be surprised. It's actually an advocacy group for those that are inside OHDSI, that are industry, to go back to their own organization on how to advocate for OMOP. Because just like your organizations, many of you guys, right, you're in here because someone bought off on OHDSI and someone bought off on OMOP and someone said it's a good idea. There's actually a lot of that has to happen in the industry as well, why should they adopt OMOP, and why is OMOP something that should be used, and what are the use cases that OMOP can be used when it comes to an industry perspective. Okay, so that's what this really is. It's an advocacy group to create awareness and knowledge and education around OMOP adoptability within the organizations, the industrial organizations themselves. Okay, which our pitch is sometimes a little different than the pitch that you would go out to an academic with. So that's what that is. The third one actually ties in a bit to the other two, right? They all kind of tie into each other. Really identifying what are the use cases that can be used, right? Because we, in OHDSI, we talk a lot about comparative effectiveness studies. We talk a lot about prediction models. We talk a lot about cohort building. But then when it comes down to industry, and because of the fact that they may want to use it for regulatory purposes, they may want to use it for clinical trial purposes, for observational research purposes, maybe market access purposes. But what are those purposes that OMOP can be used in, and when to use it and when not to, and why, right? So those are the use cases that we really need to build up. And then if there are ones that the industry really has a high interest in, for example, if I use like clinical trials, right? Let's just say for clinical trial feasibility, if we want to be able to utilize OMOP for clinical trial feasibility, what's missing in the OMOP model, and that stops us from using it? Is it education? Is it the model itself? Or is it just working with the clinical trials working group, right? If it is, then let's work with the clinical trials working group and figure out how to move that along. So that's what that is all about. So what we're asking, if anybody is interested, of course, it's called the industry working group, and most of the people that are in there are industry people, but we would love to have others come along and get their perspective. Like Jason, I know during the symposium, you were there and you provided very, very valuable feedback to the industry folks from a private academic institutions perspective, right? So it was wonderful feedback that the industry got to hear. So that's part of what we want to be able to do too, is to bring the two groups together and hear out what the challenges are on one side and what the other challenges are on the other side. So that's pretty much what the industry working group is. So do I have another slide? I can't remember. Oh, I do. See, so I kind of talked through the goals. If you can click on all three of them. So what you can see is basically these are what we're trying to do, right? Our goals, create that catalog, and then coming up with a framework, because again, in industry, they want this, but they want it at a certain speed, right? We can't go as slow sometimes as some of the studies in the academic side. And you can see the advocacy group and then the use cases. So trying to identify what our top priority use cases are. So I knew I had another slide to go through, but so that is the introduction of the industry working group. You may hear more from us, but if you want to join us, feel free. Right now, it is also not, it's more on the US side, because I think it's at 10 or 11 p.m. AM my time. So that's like either 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which doesn't exactly work for the APAC coast. But again, if you guys are interested, we can look at moving that meeting up a little further. We only meet once a month at this point in time. And a lot of the work is done outside of it. So that's kind of that. And I think it's every first Thursday or something like that. I can't remember the logistics, but if you sign up, you'll get the invitation. Any questions on the industry working group?
Is there any list that signed up for the industry work group from the companies?
There are, normally we don't disclose where our members come from, but there are quite a few big pharma clients in big pharmas in there. Majority of them are pharmas. So, but we do have two. One is what do I call them? One is a payer, one is a payer. So one is actually a health insurance company in the United States, and the other is there's actually two other ones that are more like consultant and technology companies like us. or life science companies like us, but the rest are all pharmas.
They're mostly. Go ahead.
So if there is a kind of a list of the companies signed up for the this work group, then it will be much easier for other companies, especially in the APAC side, to sign up.
Let me talk to them, because again, we normally don't disclose that information since it's OHDSI, right? It's a little different than the other way. You join, you'll find out who they are, kind of thing, right? But let me see if the group is willing to have their information, like at least their company names disclosed. So I need to ask the group, right? Makesh?
Hey, thanks, Mui. It's good to see the industry coming together, right, to make this room bigger. One thought I had was for the data catalog, is it going to be synced with what Claire's doing on the OHDSI data network, or is it going to be separate?
No, we're going to try to sync it. So
Okay.
Claire is coming to speak to this APAC community in March, but she's also coming to the industry working group to talk to the industry working group in March, also around, how can we sync the two, right? Because again, we don't want to create new efforts, right? If we can combine the efforts, that's even better. But we also have to understand whether or not the community wants that, because some community members are a bit sensitive to when we say the word sponsors, right? So it's also about how we communicate that. Again, we're not asking anybody to identify. We're just probably going to ask that as part of it. There'd be a checkbox to say, are you interested? Are you interested in working with pharma? Right? Are you interested in working with sponsors? And you check it, then we can use that to create a catalog and further enhance the catalog just for those that have that interest.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. We can sort of tier them as one public view and one more of a private view potentially as well. Happy to chat more on the cataloging side. Yeah.
That's the objective, and that's, or I should say, that's the what we would like to accomplish. But again, I am a bit sensitive against the fact that we are industry and not all organizations like to associate with industry, right? So trying to be very clear and very objective when we talk about what it is that we're trying to do as well.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Mukesh, on your question, right? Like I'm pretty sure, like we can try to sync the efforts on the catalog that Claire has currently going on, but there will be a clear distinguishment between whether organizations, the data partners in the OHDSI Evidence Network, there will be partners that are willing and not willing to be associated with industry, right? Like the phrase is, it's almost sounds like a crime, but it's not, right? It's about doing scientific research with industry. So I don't think it'll be two distinguished lists, if I would say, right? It won't be just a single list that outlines everything, and guaranteeing that everybody is going to be just open to industry, right? Working with industry.
Yeah, and the framework that we set up is probably going to be a little bit different as well, right? Because again, we're not trying to interfere with Claire's work as well, right? But at the same time, can I use much of her structure to then get the information we need, and then potentially create a different framework, a different structure for the how interfacing with a sponsor may work, right? Because again, one, it's not just about the community. Two, it's about the fact that sponsors, if the way they want it where it's going to be of high quality, right? I'm not saying that OHDSI is not high quality. See, I need to be careful what I say. Okay, it's just a different level of high quality, right? And again, if they use it for FDA submissions and all that, there's a different level of scrutiny that has to happen.
Great.
Any other questions on the industry working group?
But the details of those collaborations, like to the level for FDA approval, I guess will be left for the involving party to discuss in private, right? I mean, the workgroup
Correct.
pretty much act as a platform for people to interact and get to know each other's needs and resources, right?
Yes and no, because again, they're asking for part of this is to create the framework, right? So just like OHDSI, we have frameworks, we have data quality dashboards, we have X, Y, and Z, right? So THEMIS standards. So it's the same thing. Part of this is to create the framework for some of that stuff. So how far we go, yes, we're not going to go down to, you know, the fact that you have to be auditable and be able to traceable back because it's a regulatory use case, right? That's not where we're going down. But we do require that if you want to be, for example, a requirement maybe if you want to be able to join the industry catalog, you're going to have X data quality done, right? Above and beyond the data quality dashboard, right? It has to be of a higher quality, and we're going to use that to help potentially figure out, you know, a tier layer. Who knows? I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying that's the way we're going down, right? But those are the differences, because in the industry, the requirements are a bit higher. They're a lot higher when it comes to the quality of the data we're looking at. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Silence means no. Okay.
Cool. Nicole.
Yeah. I think we're right on time. We can hand over the floor to Nicole, where she'll give us an excellent overview of the new evidence translation workgroup.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Well, I'm glad you're saying it's excellent before you've even heard it. So that's great.
No, I really like the concept of it, Nicole, right? Because it really moved. It was a great message at the symposium last year. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Song, you can see the screen? Yep. Great. All right. Well, Mui's presentation really is a great segue into the evidence translation work group that has been proposed. And I will say that throughout these slides, I'll talk about stakeholders and things. And I don't actually say industry as one of those stakeholders, but of course it is a stakeholder in the evidence translation involved in OHDSI. So just bear that in mind. And a lot of what Mui talked about in terms of the industry work group is really the same principles that we're trying to use here in this sort of more wider evidence translation work group. So oh, here we go. So as Song mentioned, this work group was really spun out from a really interesting panel discussion we had during the 23 APAC symposium in Sydney. And what we did in that symposium was really talk about the OHDSI's mission in terms of generating evidence from, you know, quality ingredients, being high quality data, and how we go through all of the stages of taking that raw ingredient and then creating the evidence at the end. And we kind of played on the whole recipe idea in that symposium and talked about, you know, we need to collaborate to get these data together and to get people together and researchers together. And we need to standardize the data. And then we need to sort of have some, you know, spiced innovation to sort of get the flavor going from our research. And then, of course, report the results. And then we sort of talked about this idea of consuming the evidence. So we go to all of this trouble to generate the evidence. We go to all of the trouble to standardize the data so that we have this robust evidence, but we really then need to facilitate the consumption of that evidence. And that's really what this whole kind of work group is about. So in that symposium, we talked about the types of evidence that we're producing in the OHDSI community. And Azia talked a lot about, you know, what are the things we've done so far in OHDSI, what evidence have we generated. We've done a lot of work in, the infrastructure and the methods. We've done a lot of work on disease characterization, some work on the population level estimation and prediction, of course. But a lot of those studies that have been done so far have a fairly, narrow focus on some of the really big drugs and some chronic diseases. So there's a lot of opportunity in the OHDSI community to really generate evidence in other clinical areas and for other drugs. But what Azia talked about really was that what OHDSI is generating in terms of evidence doesn't necessarily always align with what the consumers of that evidence want. So what do regulators really want? What kinds of studies do they need to support their decisions? What about the health technology assessment groups? Like, what studies do they need to make their decisions about, say, cost effectiveness? Clinicians need a different sort of data or a different sort of evidence to use for a particular patient at a particular time. So perhaps they need a bit more of the prediction studies. And, there's lots of different, and that should say consumers, I think, at the end. So they need different types of evidence as well. So there's a gap there between, what OHDSI is doing and perhaps what some of the consumers of that evidence needs. And she suggested that we really need to expand our research into other health areas, into different clinical conditions, and really covering more medicines. So Patrick then sort of took that opportunity to say, well, we have this, data available to us. We have the tools to generate the evidence from that data. If we had access to all of that information, as we do with OHDSI, what questions would we ask? What would we do? What evidence would we generate? And that was a really powerful kind of thought to say, well, we can do whatever we want, but what should we do? And what would be most of use to the consumers of that evidence? So for those of you that were at the symposium, and I've talked a lot about this, we kind of had this analogy of the beer brewing process. And we talked about the ingredients being the data, our craft being our science, and the brew in the end being evidence. But the really important thing about beer, or about anything that is created, is that we have a duty to then share it. And that's the fun of what we do. We need to share that evidence. And what Patrick said in his talk earlier this year, and if you haven't listened to the first community call of 2024, it's a really insightful description of what is in store for the OHDSI community in 2024. And in that presentation, he talked about how do we make evidence actionable? So how do we create the evidence that people need? And how do we get that into the hands of the people who need to use it and can use it to make, impacts into healthcare? And then, of course, Mark then also talked. I don't know if Mark's on the call, but he really said we've abjectly failed on that step, and we really need to find ways that we can synthesize and deliver our evidence so that it is actionable in the world, across the world, in different settings, not just within our community. And really, talking about the fact that just publications probably aren't enough to get that evidence out there. So really, we need to bring kind of everyone to the table. And this work group is really about how we can improve the use and uptake of real-world evidence that we produce so that it can be actionable and can be used in decision making. And these are the stakeholders, I was talking about, and we can probably, one of those stakeholders is definitely industry, but stakeholders are, people who need the evidence for the work that they do. So, or the actual medicines they take. So consumers need information, clinicians need information, regulators need information, and researchers also need that information. So this is the panel discussion we had at the OHDSI Symposium, which generated this idea about the work group. And in that panel discussion, we had each a representation from each of the the 4 stakeholders. So we had a policy maker, a regulator, we had clinicians, we had a consumer representative, and we had researchers. And we sort of thought through some of the questions that this work group might answer. So, for example, if we think about prioritizing our research and asking questions like, how can OHDSI help you, whoever you might be, the stakeholder, by generating evidence for the questions that matter to you? So actually directing our questions to important areas that are important to the people who need to use it. And once you generate evidence for people who need it and they want it, they'll likely use it. So really trying to strategize the generation of evidence for priority questions. One of the important things I think about generating the evidence and using that evidence is trust. Okay, and we talked a lot about trust in the symposium and how do we trust the research so that we would then use it to make our decisions. And OHDSI is obviously well versed in building trust by making evidence robust and making it reliable and making it open and transparent. The other question that came up was about how can we improve the understanding of that evidence so that it can be used in decision making. So we might have trust in the evidence, but how do we actually turn that evidence into something that's understandable for the consumers of the evidence to actually do something with it? So how can we work on the way that we package up our analyses and our results so that people can actually understand what we're trying to say and understand the results that we've generated. So that's kind of the background to how this all came about. So I'm not going to go through all of this. You can look back at the presentation about how we use the Sisyphus challenge, looking at the risk of fluoroquinolones and aortic aneurysm and dissection to really show the process of how we generate the evidence and how we build trust in that evidence. And what we demonstrated was that we can increase the confidence of people in the work that we do and the evidence that we generate by systematically addressing things like bias, systematically addressing things like reproducibility, and systematically addressing things like replicability and so on. So this is just demonstrating how we went from, some confidence at the start before we presented our process. And by the end, we had a substantial shift showing, that we can increase the confidence, and increasing confidence will increase the usability of that evidence. I'll just go through here. So what do we kind of want to do with this work group? And we kind of took the liberty of being OHDSI and translating our vocabularies. And a lot of people call this kind of idea of translation knowledge translation, but we're going to call it evidence translation because that's kind of OHDSI speak. But if we do a search on knowledge translation, what you'll come up with is a lot of work out of Canada. So CNODES and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research have done a lot of work on knowledge translation. And this paper is a really lovely read for those people who are interested in this kind of work. And it talks about how we can actually provide the evidence that, clinical people need to, use that evidence. And it's, like I said, it's not just about publications in journals. It's about, providing different sorts of evidence in different formats so that people can use it to provide optimal care. And if those of you online know OHDSI's mission, it's about exactly that, improving health and healthcare. KT is also defined as the method for closing the gap from knowledge to practice. And like I said, OHDSI is very good at, you know, generating knowledge and creating the knowledge, but we really, with this work group, are hoping to close that gap between the production of the evidence and actually the implementation of that evidence into practice. So I did in background to this, I did a bit of a Google search on knowledge translation framework, and this is what I got. It's, you know, a million different ways of defining a knowledge translation framework. But, you know, again, being OHDSI, we can see patterns in the data and we can translate, and there's a lot of upside down triangles and there's a lot of circles around the triangle in all different sort of varieties. So how do we translate all of that into an OHDSI framework? So this is the knowledge to action process that was proposed by Graham et al. Like way back in 2006. And this is the kind of framework that the Canadian Institutes for Health Research are using for their knowledge to action sort of framework. And right in the centre is this upside down triangle, and it's about the knowledge creation itself. And like I said, OHDSI is all over this. We know what we're doing in knowledge creation. We know what you know, questions that we can ask. We know how to synthesize that, and we've got lots of products and lots of tools that can generate that evidence, and we can tailor that knowledge. So all of that is great. We're all over it. But in terms of the sort of the external part of it, so how do we then turn that knowledge into action? There's a whole heap of work that needs to happen. So, you know, there's an action cycle that, you know, talks about how do we identify the problem? How do we know where to prioritize? How do we adapt that knowledge to local context? How do we assess barriers to actually using that knowledge? How do we implement interventions to facilitate the uptake of it, given the health systems in different contexts? And how do we monitor the use of that knowledge? So we don't just want to publish the knowledge. We want to know, is it actually making a difference? Is it making an impact? How do we evaluate what we've done? So if we've created knowledge, it's been used to improve practice. How do we actually evaluate the improvement in outcomes because of that knowledge that we've generated? And then how do we sustain knowledge use in a full lifetime or life cycle approach? So in my sort of travels as well, I sort of came across this other framework, which is the Cochrane Knowledge Translation Framework. And basically it's just a reorganization of the same kind of cycle. But I kind of really liked the way that it positioned the knowledge translation in terms of the, you know, facilitators and the priorities for that translation. So the way that they kind of describe knowledge translation is a process with particular goals. So the first goal, again, producing evidence. So I talked about that before. So how do we prioritize and how do we co-produce that evidence? And goal 2 is around making that evidence accessible. So how do we package it and how do we push it out to people to support it being implemented into practice? But then how do we also facilitate the pull of that evidence? So how do we actually facilitate people using the evidence or finding the evidence to actually use in their practice? Goal 3 is about advocating for the evidence, and Mui talked about that in the industry work group as well. How do we advocate for the use of our evidence into practice? How do we help with the exchange of the information between the people who need it and us who generate it? And then how can we improve the climate? How do we, and this is about trust as well. This is about how do we improve the accessibility? How do we improve the appetite, I guess, for this work? And then the goal 4 is around effective and sustainable use. So given all of that, I kind of came up with these 4 buckets, I guess, of work that the evidence translation work group could potentially look at. And the first one I thought would be around the producing the evidence. So how do we actually prioritise the questions that are important to different stakeholders, and how can we co-produce it with them so that we know it aligns with their needs. So the objective, so I was trying to put together the OKRs here. So the objective is to create an appetite for our evidence. And so I thought one of the key results or the key outcomes could be setting up some consumer forums or engagement with regulators. So really trying to create dialogue between the evidence end users and us, the people who are generating the evidence. So another bucket of work is around making it accessible. So how do we package it up, and how do we facilitate the dissemination of the evidence? So how do we make it easy to find? Facilitating pull, how do we make that evidence findable? How do we develop capacity in the end users? So how do we train them up to actually understand what we do? Making the evidence palatable. So how do we actually, tailor the needs of different stakeholders to actually use the research that we generate? And that could be around developing strategic partnerships or forums to exchange ideas and that kind of thing. And lastly, the last bucket I was thinking about was how do we measure the uptake of the evidence that OHDSI generates, and how do we monitor its impact into policy and practice? So, things like creating impact stories, or how do we, monitor the diffusion of the evidence and the audiences that we reach with the evidence that we've produced. So they're the kind of the buckets. But what I will say is, we're right at the very start. So Mui talked about the industry work group and how it takes a little while to get off the ground. And these are just some thoughts initially, and I'd really like the community to come on board and be part of this work group and help us to really, bed down what are our objectives, what we'd like to do as a group in terms of, some of those outcomes. Can we facilitate some consumer forums to work out, what questions consumers, want us to ask, or the other stakeholders and so on. So we're really at the start of all this, and we really want you all to be involved and want lots of different, expertise into researchers, clinicians, consumers, and other stakeholders as well to sort of be part of this, so we can really start to, make inroads into actually, uptake of our research into something that makes a difference to healthcare. So I'll leave it there, Song, and maybe open up if people have any questions or great ideas.
Thanks, Nicole.
I think this is great. Right.
Yeah.
I think this is great. And it really actually goes well with the industry working group.
It does.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is, one of the things that I get asked a lot. That's great. You guys generate all this, but what does it mean? What's the impact? How can I take this impact back to the patients? Right. That's the number one question that I get asked from the folks that I have. Great. OHDSI does all these are great publications, but so what?
What am I going to do with it?
Yeah, what am I going to do with it? So what, right? Where's the impact, and how do we take the evidence and create actionable work from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that requires you to understand the evidence first before you can do anything about it, right? So I think it really does tie in really well, and I would love for you, and it's going to be hard, figure out how to have you come over to the industry working group and let them know that there's such a working group out there. Maybe we can form some kind of collaboration, some use cases that we can work together. The other thing that I was thinking when you talk about, doing user groups in the United States, we have a lot of patient advocacy groups, right? And I actually have avenues of talking to them. So maybe that is something, if we brainstorm together, how to work with those guys and get maybe some of the information from them, right? What's important to them, what's from an OHDSI's perspective, right? So those are my two thoughts when it comes to what you've shown, right? I think it's good because like I said, medical stuff is over my head. When you guys did the whole SO challenge, it looks cool, but it was over my head as well, right? Because again, I'm an IT geek and I'm a businesswoman, right?
Yeah.
I know how to plan things and strategically help, but
and in the end, you know, we produce all this great evidence, but when it comes to a patient, the patient just wants to know, so what does that mean for me?
Right.
What do I need to do? Should I take the medicine or should I not? Or if I did take the medicine, what should I be worried about? What should I talk to my clinician about? And it might not always be, you know, the outcomes that we look at are the outcomes that are interest to us sometimes as clinicians. And we develop phenotypes that are important to us, that we can measure in our data set, you know, that are easily recognizable as an outcome of the medicine. But for patients or consumers, sometimes the outcomes that are important to them are not those outcomes. They're the quality of life outcomes. They're the, you know, urinary incontinence, for example, is a really important outcome. It has a really big impact on a patient's life. They might not be willing to take that risk to take this medicine if they're going to have to, you know, go to the toilet all the time. But they might take a risk. That's a very rare risk of aortic aneurysm and dissection, for example. If and so it's a weighing up and a communication of risk-benefit balance in terms of, you know, the context of a patient themselves, and how do we communicate the work that we do so that a patient can actually make that decision for themselves and be part of their healthcare journey rather than just doing what they're told by a clinician. So I think that's a really important point.
Here's your beer.
Oh, lovely. Is it full or is it empty?
Because it's full. It's in the refrigerator. I'm not an IPA person, so I just, you know, the Asian thing, we bring it home for a souvenir, right?
It's so very rare because there's not many left.
Correct. So this is my souvenir. The two that I picked up, they're still in the refrigerator.
Does it have any expiration date?
There is, but for me, it's just, like I said, it's a souvenir, right? It's not meant to.
Indeed.
I asked my family members, and they are all not IPA people. They're more light beer people. So I'm like, dude, I have IPAs if you want to try from Australia. They're like, because I said, keep the can, right? I keep the can. Just don't mess with my can. But nobody wants to drink it. So one day before they expire, maybe
that's a very good question from the consumer, Chan.
Right.
If I have the expiry date.
Consumer, what's the expiry? That's a great one, Jack. I love that.
How do I know when it expires? Oh, right here. I think it's June 24th, June 28th, 2024. It has a 1-year expiration date, I assume, because these were made in July. So yes, I got another 4 months.
Okay.
To get somebody to drink them
before the mid-year.
Yeah. How can you keep alcohol, Mui? If it's in front of you, you need to chug it down. Like it's.
You don't realize how much alcohol sits in this room.
Why?
you don't realize how much alcohol sits in this room, and it never gets touched.
Really? I would like to be there someday.
There's a refrigerator right there. The only thing that sits in that refrigerator are alcohol.
Wow.
Okay.
That's pretty
There's a wine fridge on the side that all that sits in there are red wine and white wine. So again, you don't realize how much alcohol sits in it. There's so much alcohol in this room. Okay.
You might want to.
We might want to stop recording, but you know, I could easily grab
stop
any
recording. I think.
Well, it is my own personal house, so.
Anyway.
But yes, that's all that's in the refrigerators in here. They're all just alcohol. So, which I don't drink.
After all of that song, yes. I think I'm looking for volunteers, not just to drink the alcohol, but volunteers to be part of this work group. And I think Elise is going to set up well, there's already a Teams channel, so I'm not 100% sure how you sign up to be on that particular Teams channel, but we will send an email around and get people signed up.
You go to the working group section. So in the OHDSI website, you go to the
Yep.
working group section and then it says join working group. Your working group should be there. And then all you have to do is check it and then you'll
Yep.
automatically get added to the Teams channel.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
I'm
how
just
it
not
works.
sure if we've got that on the list yet. So I'll work with the list
see.
to get that on the list and send that around. So yeah. So back to you, Song. Sorry, we've gone a bit over.
Sorry, we also got distracted by alcohol.
Yeah, I can confirm it's not on the list yet, Nicole. So you
Okay,
might want to
I'll
work
talk to
with
Elise.
Elise
Yep.
to get it on the list. So
Right.
guys, we are talking about the work group sign up form where you can check the work groups that you want to join. And we'll probably see Nicole's work group pop up there. While you're at it, if you're not part of OHDSI APAC yet, you got the invite forwarded, you'll have the take the liberty and check OHDSI APAC as well, and maybe also the industry working group guys as well, right? Since today is the new work group session, please have a look around. All right, we are 3 minutes over, but I think we had a great session today. Lots of exchanges. Hope to see you guys in 2 weeks for the guys who joined the scientific forums, and in a month for the people who just joined the community calls. All right, thanks everyone. Take
Happy
care.
Lunar New Year for those that are still
Yeah.
celebrating Lunar New Year. So bye.
All right.
Happy New
Thanks,
Year. Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.